am so excited to be here tonight and to share with you a little bit about me, and also to be talking to you about this idea and this principle of creating your beautiful life, and that it's always possible no matter what your circumstances are. So I'm going to, let's see. There we go. You can see my Instagram slide up at the end. I think I'm at the end of my presentation, so I think I'm going to try, see if I can take it to the beginning. Is that possible? Let's see. Oh, yep, there we go. Perfect. Okay, we'll get all the tech figured out. Some of my pictures are a little wonky, but most of them are formatted right. So this is me. I am Shelby Hansen, and I'm a kidney transplant recipient. I had a kidney transplant 4 years ago, and I want to talk to you a little bit about what it's like to have a chronic illness. And my guess is that if you are somebody that lives in the United States, you're one of the 1 in 2 that at some point in your life will either end up having a chronic illness or a disability. And it's a pretty scary statistic when you think about it. But really, I'm sorry. I'm like, my little daughter just came in. I'm like, go to bed. It's late here. Anyway, so what I want to talk to you about is how you can create this life that you may not see right now. It may seem like it's really far away and it may seem really scary, but I want you to know that this is possible. Okay. And a little bit about me. My parents met when they were pretty young. And my dad was in the Army, and he retired after I had gone to college. So I grew up all over the United States, and spoiler alert, I married somebody in the Air Force. So I have lived in 13 different states, in 2 different countries, foreign countries. So my water bottle has all the states that I've lived in, minus Utah and Washington, because the Etsy shop didn't get to those states in alphabetical order yet. So I'm hoping to add those too. But what I want to draw from this is that when I was growing up, my mom is an incredible woman, and I really love every single lesson that she's taught me from birth until now. But she was somebody that got married very young and had children very young. She was married when she was 19, and she married somebody in the Army and left her home pretty quickly after she was married. And then within 13 months, she had me. And I really was her confidant. I was her best friend. And that's because she was so lonely. She was thrust into a new situation where she didn't have supports. And because of that, there was this role reversal that happened while I was growing up, where so many of the times my mother did not know how to emotionally care for herself. And so she would look to me to reassure her and to help her feel better about herself. And I don't fault her for this. She didn't know how to do it any better than what she did. But having that sort of upbringing and that introduction to life in that way, it really set me up to be a giver in my life, which I love that part of me. I love that I am able to give. But sometimes when you're put into that role of being a caregiver for somebody that's supposed to be taking care of your emotional well-being, it makes it so that it's really hard to receive. And that's a lot of what I want to draw my remarks upon today, is helping you to practice that muscle and that skill of receiving when you've only been taught that being a giver is what is expected, what is required, and what is valued, especially from women and mothers. Now, as Lisa so nicely explained in the beginning, I'm a life coach, and I primarily coach with women who have chronic illness, and many of them are mothers. And we have this stigma of, if you're a mom, like, it's your job to give. This is what you do. You give until you can't give anymore, and then you go give some more. And heaven help if you if you need anything. And to ask for that, it's showing signs of weakness. It's showing signs that you're not good enough, that you're not cut out for this job. And especially as, like I said, growing up military and then marrying into the military, there's this social stigma of military wives that we really need to be independent. We need to have all the answers and not have to wait for our husbands, because so many times they're out of town with TDYs or they're deployed. And really asking out and trying to get that kind of support that you need can be looked down on in those communities. So I'm going to back up a little bit and tell you a little bit of a story about me. So this was my life pre-transplant. Again, I like the pictures are a little wonky. They're a little short. They're supposed to be a little bit taller, but some of the pictures will get better. We were living in Florida in 2015, and when I was living there, I was 31 years old. I had 3 little kids, and I was taking my daughter back home from preschool. She's the one in the striped dress right there when she was 2 years old. And as I went to pick up the mail on the way back to my house, I opened up the mailbox and I looked and I saw that there was bills and some ads and coupons, but there was also a letter from my life insurance company. And I went to open it because a few weeks earlier, I had gotten a blood draw for life insurance because I was really ahead of the game. And the year before, I had gotten a life insurance policy. My husband had gotten one because we knew we were young and healthy, but he was paying $50 a month. No, he was paying $25 a month for his policy. And I was paying $50 a month for mine. And I just thought that was ludicrous because I was young and healthy and I should be paying the same amount as him. So I tore open the letter from the life insurance company. And as I looked at it, I was so shocked because not only did I not get a cheaper rate for my life insurance, they told me that I was denied life insurance. And I was like, that doesn't make sense. I already have a policy. And as I read on the labs that they had, there was one that stuck out. It was GFR. I was like, I don't even know what a GFR is. That doesn't make any sense to me. And so I called my friend who was a nurse and told her my lab results. And she said, you need to call a doctor right now. And I called my doctor. They confirmed with the labs that I was, in fact, in kidney failure. I had less than 20% kidney function. Now, this came as a shock to me and to all the people around me because I'm a giver. I'm really good at giving to everybody and not letting anybody see what's really going on behind closed doors. Because if I really would have thought about it, I knew how exhausted I was. I had severe exhaustion, especially when we moved to Florida. And when I told my husband the news, because of course I got the life insurance and the diagnosis and everything while he was in Japan for work with the Air Force, he was the only one that said, well, that makes sense. You've been really sick. And that's when I knew that this was a proper diagnosis, even though it didn't feel right. Because we had moved to Florida and I began sleeping 12 hours at night. I couldn't keep my eyes open past 7 p.m. and I couldn't wake up before 7 a.m. And then when my daughter would take a nap, I would take another 2 or 3 hour nap with her. Now, backing up, this daughter, the one that's snuggling me right here in the picture, she was born in Japan. We lived there for 2 amazing years. And she was born, and within 8 weeks of her being born, we were with my 4-year-old, my 2-year-old, and newborn in tow. We were flying across the world to go move to Alabama, across the country to move to California, and then across the country again to move to Florida before she was 1.5. And I just chalked up all of this exhaustion to just, I have 3 kids. Like I'm supposed to be tired. That's what everybody says. With being so disconnected from my body that I had no idea how severe my symptoms were and how severe my illness was. When I walked into the ER from the doctors, as they looked at my labs and my blood levels, they almost gave me a blood transfusion on the spot because I was so anemic. But I didn't have time to go to doctor's appointments before that because I didn't really think there was anything wrong. And I'd gone to doctors before with really nondescript, vague symptoms like fatigue and nausea. And each time they just dismissed me and told me to go on my way. And so I had dismissed myself when I should have been listening to myself. Okay. So there are 3 lessons that I really want to share with you tonight that I have learned in my journey going through kidney failure and a subsequent kidney transplant. And the first one is that you're either always running towards or away from an emotion. Okay. So the way that I like to think about this is that I use this model in my coaching called the self-coaching model. It's through the life coach school where I was trained. And it talks about how there's facts in our lives. We call these the circumstance. They're the things that just happen outside of us. They're things that everybody could agree on, like the weather. Like if it was 70 degrees outside, I'm like, it's actually probably closer to 45 degrees outside here right now. So we'll go with that. That's the fact. Now, everybody has a different thought about the facts. Now, my thought about 45 degrees is that's cold. I need to go put a coat on. And when I'm thinking, okay, well, I'll go back to that. But my brother-in-law, like if I told him it's 45 degrees, he's like, that's great camping weather. I'm just like, how is that possible? Everybody has a different opinion about the facts of our lives, the circumstance that you may find yourself in. And the most important thing about thoughts is that your thought, whatever it is you're thinking, generates your emotion. So me thinking about the very neutral circumstance, the weather being 45 degrees, me thinking it's really cold outside, I'm going to have to put a coat on, it might create some emotion like frustration or disappointment, something of that flavor. I could get really specific, but in general. Whereas my brother-in-law, he could be thinking, this is great camping weather, which for him, that belief, that thought creates the emotion of anticipation for him. Like here I am feeling discouraged or, disappointed, and he's feeling anticipation and desire to go camping. Now, why I focus so much on this is because emotions are the fuel that drives every action in your life. If you think about going to fill up a car, like I always fill it up with like just the regular, like the cheap gas. I'm like, that's how I roll. But some people use like the premium gas. They use different types of fuel types to fuel their cars as they go. Now, some people will tell you like, oh, this gas level, this gas is better than this gas. But really, it's about what you are choosing to be the fuel source for the actions that you take in your life. Now, where we could argue like the gas types, like maybe some are better than others, emotions are not like that. Emotions are amoral. There's no good ones. There's no bad ones. Emotions just simply exist in our bodies to give you an internal guidance system to help you to stay aligned with your true purpose. And the way I like to think about it is that you have a thought in your mind and it starts to vibrate the neural synapses in your brain that sends vibrational pulses down through your body that gives you physical sensations. Those physical sensations are neutral. They don't mean anything about you. So if you're feeling angry or discouraged or frustrated or tired or whatever that emotion is that you might consider a bad emotion to have, an undesired emotion, the only reason that it's feeling undesired is because you are trying to run away from that emotion. You've become used to that being an uncomfortable emotion. And the only reason that people do things in this world is because of how you think it will make you feel or how you think that you will not feel. That's the only reason we ever do things. So whatever emotion that you're using to be the fuel for your actions is going to give you the result in your life. And it all starts with a thought. So let me give you a quick example of this. Last year, this time, I was not exercising very much. And I was a little bit on the down, a little bit depressed side. Things were still a little dicey with COVID. I'm immunocompromised, and it was really challenging for me. I'm not going to lie. It's been pretty hard. But what happened was at that time around like October, November, I was like, I used to run triathlons. I would really love to run one again. And I started to put that intention out into the world. I started to really think about it. I started to make a goal. And I started to think about the future me that next summer What would her life look like? How would she prioritize exercise and wellness and fitness in order to have achieved that goal? And so I used those beliefs that it's totally possible for me to run a triathlon again. In fact, I think it might be fun. I also worked with a chronic pain coach, which is something that I also dabble in with the chronic illness. I worked with a chronic pain coach because not only did I want to run a triathlon, but I wanted to run a triathlon without any physical chronic pain. Because I've had chronic pain in my hips since I was 14 years old. And once I hired this chronic pain coach and started to see what was going on with that chronic neuroplastic pain that was being created by my brain, I was able to, 2 months ago, run my second triathlon of the year. And that's because of what I was thinking about that goal. My goal was actually my circumstance. The goal to go, I had a goal to run a triathlon. That's something neutral. And my thoughts, what I was thinking about that's what created the emotion that was generating all of my actions to prepare for the triathlon. And some of those were, this is going to be fun. Another one is, it's totally possible. Another one was, I just want to do this. And each one of those created a different emotion for me. Now, I just want to do that really created desire. And from desire fueling my actions, that really led me to these beautiful results that kept building and building until I was ready to run the Cleveland Rock and Roll Mini Sprint Triathlon. Wasn't long, but that wasn't my point. My point was I wanted to do it. I wanted to do my first open water swim triathlon. And because of what I was thinking I would feel at the end of that accomplishment, that's why I wanted to do it. I wanted to feel, listen to that, I wanted to feel the emotion of accomplishment because that's how I thought I would feel at the end. Okay, and the reason that I also bring up this lesson is because so many times we run away from fear. And I've heard some of the other speakers in this conference talk about different ways to deal with fear. And I have loved everyone that I've heard. One of the ways that I like to think about fear is that fear is a friend of mine. Fear is trying to protect me and help me, and I don't have to resist the fear. I don't need to stop doing something because I'm afraid. I can evaluate that and decide what I want to do, but I don't resist the fear. I allow the fear to live in my body. Okay, moving along. I'm going to give you guys just a little Cliff Notes version, but as I told you, when I found out that I was in kidney failure, I had 3 children. And right before we had found out that I was in kidney failure, we had spent the 6 months prior to that trying to have our 4th child. I felt really called to have another child and kept not happening. And so I was getting really frustrated. And then when we found out that I was in kidney failure, I was like, okay, we gotta push halt on this. Like, this needs to be something that we don't look at quite yet. And I don't for me, I personally believe in God. I don't care what you call it, but like, call it universe, call it energy, call it source, whatever that higher power is for you. I hope that you can relate to this, but I had to have a very serious conversation with God and say, I really felt called to have this 4th baby. And now I don't see that that's a possibility. I don't see that that's going to be something that happens for me. But I'm open for it to happen however you want it to. But I'm not going to do it right now, not with my health like this. And obviously it hasn't happened because my health has been so challenging and so bad. And so the moment that we found out that I had kidney problems, we stopped and we actively prevented pregnancy. And so I got on the kidney transplant list in January of 2016. And in June of that year, I got up to go to church and I couldn't stand up without crying. I don't know if you're anything like me, but I tend to push until I can't anymore. That's the old me, thank heavens. I love her. I love everything that she got done for me, but it's not how I function anymore. And so I would generally tend to push until I was crying, and that's when I would let myself off the hook. So I was crying and my husband was already at church, and I had to get the kids to church. And I was like, this is what going on dialysis feels like. Because I always was just like a sliver away from going on dialysis. And so I told my husband, I don't know if I can make it. I think he came home and helped me get the kids ready to church. And that Sunday, as the kids were sitting on the bed with him, I kept thinking, I got to go to the doctor tomorrow. We're probably going to have to talk more serious intervention plans. And a little something said, you might as well take a pregnancy test just to rule things out before you go. So I went and took the pregnancy test, and I am not a person who typically swears. I took that pregnancy test and it immediately popped up positive, and I swore. And I told my children to leave the room, and I talked to my husband, and I told him on Father's Day, 2016, that I was pregnant with our fourth baby. Now, I went to doctors. I went to the OBGYN, and the first one that saw me highly recommended that I terminate the pregnancy. He told me that my life would be jeopardized, the baby would not make it, and that I would most likely be on dialysis. And this was a personal decision for me, and I could, of course, never make the decision for somebody else in any sort of situation that is similar or different from mine. But for me, I knew that wasn't an option for me. But I didn't really believe at that moment that I would have the opportunity to have that baby. And so for the next 9 months, every time I went to the bathroom, I expected to miscarry. And each week as the pregnancy progressed, he was still there. He was still alive. He was still growing. He was still developing properly. And I scoured the internet for any stories of women that were pregnant on the transplant list or pregnant in dialysis. And there's hardly any research on it. And there's hardly any people that are talking about it. And so and I felt such deep shame for getting pregnant, knowing that I had this severe illness. It wasn't on purpose. It was definitely not on purpose. But I felt such shame for bringing a baby into a life that I was already struggling with. And I knew, since I couldn't find anybody else out there that was talking about this, I felt that whisper again say, it's because that's what you're supposed to do. I need you to be the one to show other women what is possible. And so that's when I started my Instagram journey, really, about sharing about my chronic illness experiences. I had started to, I'd been on Instagram since 2009. Like, I love Instagram, but I mostly shared just like food and crafts. And this is when I started to show my face on Instagram. And I can't tell you how many women have messaged me about kidney disease, about pregnancy. And of course, I'm not a doctor. And I tell everybody to go talk to your doctors because that's the most important. But there is an unmet need here for people talking about fertility, talking about what family life looks like if you are less than perfectly healthy, which, as we established at the beginning, 50% of the population at some point in their life is going to experience a chronic illness or a disability. And we don't talk about it. We don't talk about how to care for children, how to set up systems that work so that your kids can be well adjusted and you're taking good care of them and good care of yourself at the same time. So this picture was taken when I was 37 weeks pregnant. And not only had I developed kidney, I'm sorry, I've got to back up one thing. Something amazing that happened while I was pregnant was that my kidney function actually improved during the pregnancy. And my personal philosophy is that as my baby was growing, as he was developing, his kidneys were getting bigger and healthier. And since we were sharing a blood supply, his kidneys started to filter the toxins that were in my blood that my own kidneys couldn't. Okay, so like I said, this is 37 weeks. My kidneys were not doing great. I did not ever end up on dialysis, but I did start to get some itchy hands and itchy feet, which I knew was a bad sign because it was abnormal. I told my doctors and they said, you need to get induced. You have cholestasis, which is a pregnancy-induced liver condition. And so I was induced, and this was last pictures taken before the birth of my son. And here he is. Oh, next slide. Because step 2, lesson number 2 I want to share with you is just how precious life truly is. I went through that entire experience pregnant with my son, understanding just how precious his life was, not knowing if he would make it to birth, not knowing how long I'm going to live. Still, I have this. Still, I don't know how long I will live with this condition. In my mind, I've created and I know exactly how long I live and how I die, which, if you're curious, is 80 years old, because I'm like, that sounds really old for me. It's not old in general, but if I live to 80 years old, I will count that a massive success. 80 years old, I hold my husband's hand while we sleep, and I go to sleep and fall asleep and pass away in my sleep. So that's how I die, guys. It's not in a hospital. It's not on the transplant table. Nothing out of that. But I have to really think about that, because there are so many fears with having kids, and not and anything can happen at the drop of a hat. You can go check the mail and your life can change. You can get a text from somebody and somebody's gone, or somebody's severely disabled, or they have some sort of an illness that's going to impact their life for the rest of their life. And that's why these moments that I have with my family, with my loved ones, I savor them, because they are so precious, because you never know how many of them you're going to get. Okay. Here is a picture of my sweet little baby, John Ezekiel, who was born on January 20th, 2017. Absolutely perfect. But like I said, there was nobody else out there talking about these kinds of things. And so you can see that picture on the right, a little Instagram picture. Remember when we did like those all of those collages and like the camera frame things back then? We lived at the beach. I took him to the beach with me, and I wanted to document what was hard and what was really beautiful about my life. Okay, so after he was born, my kidney function took a real good dive. Now, this is actually not my son. This is my nephew. This was Thanksgiving, right before Thanksgiving of 2017. And I had posted this picture on Facebook, and I was, obviously too ill and too tired to be able to really help with Thanksgiving preparations, or maybe I had, but I was really exhausted afterwards. I posted this on Facebook, and all of the comments were like, "Oh, are you sick? How are you doing?" And I was like, "Don't I look good?" But now I look back and I see it too, and I'm like, yeah, I really was sick. And people were not used to seeing me on the couch. They were used to seeing me up and about when I was having my good days. They weren't used to seeing this. And it got to the point where I would be on the couch like 1 or 2 times, 1 or 2 days, and then up for like a day, and then 1 or 2 days. And I remember at that moment, actually, I do have a freebie on my Instagram, and I was looking up on Pinterest, how do you play with your child when you can't get off the couch? Like, that's something that no mom should ever have to do. So, oh yeah, there we go. Oh, actually, my Instagram is Shelby Creates a Beautiful Life. That's another one from before. So, but yeah, so this was when it started to get serious, that I was like, I might need to get a graft. I might need to go on dialysis. And that following summer, on the 4th of July, there you go, I got the call for a transplant. And I was thinking about this earlier today, because as I got that call that there was a kidney available for me to have, I didn't know whether I should say yes or no, because I was so in denial about how sick I was. I was like, somebody else should get it. I'm okay. You can see in the previous picture, I was not okay. And it took people outside, because I was so disconnected from myself. I was disconnected from my emotions. I was disconnected from my internal boundaries and the way that I was taking care of myself, because I was so focused on other people in that giving scenario that it was really hard to be the receiver. And going back to around that time, I had made a promise to myself that, like, actually go back a little bit further. My very first life coach was talking to me about getting and receiving support. And I just told her, in Florida, like there just wasn't as many people. Like I have a good system here in Michigan for people to help me out, but in Florida, like there weren't. And she looked at me and she was like, I do not believe that is true. I was like, you weren't there? Like, how can you say that? And I was like, why are you saying that? And she's like, well, like, why do you think they wouldn't support you? I was like, well, I would ask them people to do stuff and they just would flake out on me or they wouldn't show up. And she's like, tell me about one time that happened when you asked somebody and they flaked out and they didn't show up. And I was like, dang it, you got me. I had made those scenarios all up in my head. It hadn't actually happened. I just had imagined, like, if I ask this person, then they're not going to be available to help. And then if I try to rely on them and then they don't follow through, it's going to be even worse for me. So I should just do this on my own. And so at that point, I made a commitment to myself that if somebody asked me if they could help me in any way, I had to say yes, which was really hard for me as a giver. But as Brene Brown says, if you are not willing to receive, then you are giving with condition and judgment. And oh gosh, that hit me like, stabbed me in the heart because I'm like, no, I'm just giving. I don't need anything back from anybody. I just want to be on this powerful side of the equation. I don't want to be on the vulnerable side of receiving and perhaps feeling let down if I don't get the help in the way that I need. And so if anybody asked, I said yes. In fact, I had an elderly lady at church ask me if she could watch my 9-month-old for like half day once a week. And old me before that would have said, heck no, I can do this on my own. I'm a military wife. I've grown up. I've done all of these things. Like I'm amazing. I'm an independent person. I raised my 3 younger sisters. Like I got this. But because I had made that commitment, it was so hard because I was like, and now obviously if she wasn't a safe person, I wouldn't have said yes. She was. So I was like, okay, I'm saying yes to this. But I also made a condition that if anybody ever said the words to me, well, if there's anything you can think of, I'd love to help. Just let me know if you need any help. I made it a condition for myself that I had to say yes, and I had to get back with them within 24 hours of what specifically they could do to help because I needed to practice this receiving muscle that was so weak. My giving muscle was strong, so strong that that really like I had nothing left to give. So, and it helped me to get really creative too, because in the past I'd always been on such crazy diets, like trying to decrease the inflammation in my kidneys. And because of that, excuse me, people would ask if they could bring meals. And I'd always say, yeah, bring something for my kids. I'll figure out something for me. But then I realized, hey, I've already grocery shopped for these meals that I need, and I have the recipes. I could just give all of that food and the recipe to the person and ask them to bring it to me for dinner at 6:00 the next day. It had never crossed my mind to do something like that because I was like, that would actually be really helpful. And so I started to find ways that people could help me because I'm like, think about it. If you ask somebody what you like, oh, I'd love to help. If you can think of anything, let me know. I'm always ready. And they gave you exactly what to do. Gosh, doesn't that just take all the indecision out of it? I know if I go make somebody a meal, I'm like, I don't know if they're going to like this. She knew that's exactly what I wanted. And I think that's how I started practicing asking universe, asking God a little bit more about what I really wanted and what I really needed. Okay, so going back to this, I got my transplant in July, and this was the ultimate act in learning how to receive because I was literally receiving an organ from somebody that had passed away. And my healing didn't go very well. About 3 days after my transplant, the transplant team came in a rush into the room and said, "We need to do an ultrasound right now. We think that the blood supply has been cut off and that your kidney is dying." And I'd just been through this major surgery. My husband and I immediately said a prayer, please, please let this not be the case. And so as we went into the ultrasound, the blood supply was still good, but they couldn't figure out why the kidney wasn't working. And so I went to, sorry, excuse me, like, get my head back. I went to a biopsy 3 weeks after my transplant, and actually it was the 1.5 weeks after. And the fellow there was like, it's like, I've seen kidneys go have a sleepy kidney, one that doesn't work very well, isn't filtering those toxins yet. I've seen it go like 3 weeks. 3 weeks came and went. 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks. I'm sicker now after the transplant than I was before, because not only did they give you all of these wonderful immunosuppressing drugs, those drugs are also nephrotoxic, meaning that they will kill your kidneys. And so the drugs that they were giving me, my native kidneys that were kind of working, they were now dying because of the medication, and my new transplant wasn't working. And so about 5 weeks into it was when I started really noticing and recognizing that I needed to allow my body to come out of the fight or flight state that it had been in. I needed to welcome in rest. I needed to welcome in this rest and digest, this rest and repair state, and really focus on allowing and accepting and receiving the health that this new kidney was giving me. And during this time, I had plasmapheresis and IVIG, some really heavy duty methods to help kick this kidney into starting to work. I couldn't pick up my son for 3 months after my transplant, and this amazing woman became my son's second mom because I was at such risk of herniating. I couldn't put him in his high chair to feed him. I couldn't pick him up out of his crib. And he was my last baby. I was trying to soak in all of those baby moments. And there's my sweet husband. Yes, he is using hand sanitizer as a pillow in the ER for all the times that we were trying so desperately to get this health back that I wanted so badly. And 7 weeks came, and finally the toxin levels started to drop. And I'm going to go to this third lesson that I want to teach you, which is that you always have the ability to create a life you love. Before my kidney started to work, I don't know if I had asked the transplant team or not, but even when I had this sleepy kidney, we were in Michigan. We went up to Sleeping Bear Dunes up north because I still needed to live. Even if my body wasn't cooperating, I still needed to see the water. Water is so healing for me. And like I said, it finally started to work. My kidney started to recover and started to come back. But I didn't need to wait for the circumstance to change for me to have amazing thoughts about my life that were creating these emotions, that were fueling these actions and having the result of loving this life. Each moment that I got of my life, whether it was going to be a really short time, because I didn't know if it was going to be short or if it was going to be long. And it really helped me to understand what mortality can potentially feel like and what was the legacy that I wanted to leave. And the legacy that I wanted to leave and I want to continue to leave is that it is possible to create whatever you want. Because that's the thing. You can believe whatever you want. That is something that not millions, but leaders around the world have tried to control people's thoughts, tried to control their emotions, and they can't do it. And I want my kids to know that it's possible to create love in yourself, that emotion of love by what you're thinking, what you're focusing on, because it matters what you focus on. It matters if you're focusing on the things that are lacking or focusing on the things that are going to grow you and help you to grow into the person that you want to become. Okay. 2 months post-transplant, after I had my transplant, even you can see this, like I still couldn't pick up my sweet son at this time. my kidney had started filtering, but what you don't see on this picture, you see like a cute kid with his mom in the sunflower field. Like, doesn't everybody do that? What you can't see is that his little hand where it is literally inches away from where my transplant incision was. I was terrified he was going to just right into my incision. And he was up on a hay bale. And if he had fallen, I wouldn't have been able to catch him because I couldn't have grabbed him. So these things, like, we live in a world of juxtaposition where we have our highest highs and our lowest lows. But that's part of what makes life so beautiful. When you think about a picture, like, you can have black and white, like they're kind of boring. Like a white piece of paper is just kind of boring to look at. You wouldn't put a white piece of paper up as artwork. What makes it a piece of art, whether it's a photograph or a painting, is how the light and the dark and the contrast interacts with itself in order to make beautiful images, especially if you're taking a photograph, how the light comes into the lens and you capture that light and the colors, that's what creates it. And so you have to have those highs and those lows in order to have that full human experience. So I will show you this one. This is my sweet little family today. They are not so little anymore. My oldest son is 15. I have a 13-year-old daughter, a 10-year-old daughter. And my little Zeke started kindergarten this year. Now, I went back to work about a year after my transplant when things with my health had kind of had settled. I was able to go back to work as a speech therapist, and I loved it. I loved being able to do the work and that I'd been trained in, and to help people learn how to communicate better. I have always been fascinated with brains. And then I went back, of course, the 2019-2020 school year. Good ideas, right? For somebody that's immunocompromised. And then I ended up homeschooling my children. And that's when we moved once again, because do we ever stay in the same place? Where I moved, and I really had this opportunity to say, what do we really want? Because I had the pull to go to life coaching for a few years, but I'd also had the pull to do speech. And so as I had made that decision back when I went back to work, I was like, do I want to be a life coach or do I want to do speech? And I knew that I didn't want to just do coaching because I thought that I would fail at speech. And so that's part of the reason why I went back to be a speech therapist. After being a stay-at-home mom for 10 years, it's like, I want to go prove that I can go do this. And it was so fascinating because I had kids as moms come up to me and be like, you're the best speech therapist we've ever had. And I'm like, you guys don't know that I don't know what I'm doing. I was like at home, like constantly looking up new therapies, trying to figure things out for their kids. But when we did that move, I had been working for a year and I knew I could be successful at that. I knew I could be a success as a speech therapist. My heart was calling me to help women, especially that have chronic illnesses, especially that are the givers in their lives, learn how to practice that receiving muscle, learn how to allow emotions to be safe in their bodies, not something that you want to resist, not something that you want to push away from, and learn how to become friends with your body now. Now I talk to my body all the time. People probably think I'm crazy, but I ask her permission first. I don't look outside of me for the answers anymore. I already know that I have all the answers that I need. In fact, this was something that my sister gave me when I was when I got my transplant. It says, all that I need is within me. And I will tell you that too, my friend. All that you need is already within you. I'm so honored to be able to speak with you today. And if you want to follow along on my Instagram journey, you can continue to follow me here. Here's the QR code for it. Shelby Creates a Beautiful Life. And I also have a freebie. I don't know if it'll be on the outro, but you should be able to get a hold of it. I have clarity classes that I hold every Monday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern time. And with these creating clarity classes, it's going to help you know exactly what you want to create for the upcoming week. All right. Thank you so much for this opportunity.